Hi there, my name is Sloan Lambert. I am a Virginia attorney specializing in family law and estate planning, and I'm so excited to be here for the Connected Mindset podcast.
Hello, everybody. I'm Greg Tomchick. Welcome to the Connected Mindset podcast, where each week we bring you the stories to better connect with the world around you. Let's dive into this week's podcast.
Sloan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this topic. One of the ways I like to start the show is, what do we need to understand about the family law system to understand the mission that you're on today?
That's a great question. It's a loaded question. I think there are a lot of things when people come in to talk about something they're going through, whether it be divorce, whether it be child custody, whether it be guardianship, adoption, any number of family law topics. They're all coming in because they're going through something that they never thought they were going to be going through. And I think that one of the weaknesses of the system in general is that it can be really, really cold. And I think that understanding that people are going through something that they don't want to be going through. I think a lot of times when clients come in, they don't want to be talking to me. They don't want to be going through a custody battle or a divorce. And so I think the system, in terms of reading the Virginia Code, reading what's necessary, even being in front of a judge who has to apply those Virginia Code elements, it can just seem really, really cold. And so I think that the system can benefit from a lot more warmth. There's also a time as an attorney, again, for fierce advocacy and being intense in the courtroom and being harsh, for lack of a better term, when you need to be. But I think that one thing that the system in general could really benefit from is just more warmth and having, at least for the clients, just a softer place to land, because it's a very adversarial system. People are going to be putting the worst parts of the opponent out. And I think that understanding that everyone who is in a family law battle of some sort doesn't want to be there, I think understanding that people could really benefit from that mindset.
Yeah, you're putting together typically in court, it's a lot of friction in court in general, business court, any other court. And then you put the people component or kids component with that.
Right.
And it creates kind of the perfect storm for people.
Definitely.
Why did you get into it? And I guess what from a mindset perspective have you learned help people navigate such a treacherous time that they're going through?
I love that question because I never thought I'd be doing family law. That no truer statement has ever been made. I did not want to be doing family law, again, because it can be so cold and because people are going through things that they don't want to be going through. I was in real estate law for a while. I was excited to help people sign off on houses. I was excited to help people get into a new home or sell a home and have that money hit the bank. I was excited about that. But I just felt that there was, again, for lack of a better term, kind of just an itch that wasn't being scratched. I really loved litigation. And all throughout law school, I did mock trial, I did trial advocacy, and those kind of fake, for lack of a better term, trials. And I loved it. I loved objecting. I loved screaming in the courtroom, not screaming, but I loved being able to argue and kind of be the bad guy because I was representing someone where I was their good guy. And I could be a bad guy to the other side. I loved that. But after law school, the way that, frankly, the cards were falling, I was kind of in the transactional side. And most of the time, you're either a transactional attorney where you're doing tax documents, real estate, something of that nature, or you're in litigation. And that's where you're doing your criminal law, your prosecution, your defense, your family law. And so I knew I wanted litigation, but the cards just weren't falling that way. Jobs weren't working out. So I was in a real estate position. And it was very comfortable. I really liked it. But at the same time, I just was really missing that litigation, that kind of adversarial system where I was on someone's side and they needed someone just to fight for them. I really, really wanted that. And so then I found the firm I'm at now, Malone Hatley, and I saw that it was founded by a woman. And I really wanted to learn from someone who is kind of in my same season, but also at the same time understands what it's like to try and kind of climb that ladder when you are kind of a younger female attorney. And Rebecca Malone was exactly that. So I started researching family law and I was like, I don't know if that's something I want to be doing. But then for me, it also really developed from a faith perspective. I'm, a strong Christian, and a lot of times when people come into the family law system, they feel very broken. And if there's anywhere that Jesus would be if he were here, he'd be sitting with broken people. And so for me, that was my mindset too. And I was like, okay, I feel called to be chasing the broken and helping them realize that their story doesn't end there. And family law very soon just became something that clicked in my mind. I was like, that is what I think I'm supposed to be doing. So now that I am doing it, I do feel affirmed in that. So
yeah, it brings me to like the most difficult things that I've gone through throughout my journey. And I think that's when we question our faith most.
Yes.
And we also need it the most during those times. How do you don't want to be a therapist in those,
right?
And you want to be extremely factual, but how do you help people regain the faith so they can see things clearly? Because I know through the times that I've gone through transitioning out of baseball and just different things I've had happen, that's when I have lack of clarity and everything is blurry and I feel dizzy.
Yep.
How do you bring people back down to earth to help them see what they need to see to kind of pave that best path forward for themselves?
So for a family law attorney, it's interesting because you do want to be a therapist a lot of the time, but then you remember, okay, I don't have those credentials. I'm not qualified to be sitting with people sharing their deepest, darkest feelings with me and asking me to help kind of bandage it. So for me, what I do is I do sometimes fall back to the Virginia Code saying, yep, share anything with me. I can let you know maybe which element of the 20-124 factors it falls under. But at the same time, a lot of times people come in and they just want someone who's on their side to listen. And sometimes those aren't comfortable conversations. Sometimes they're telling me things that they've never told anyone and that they don't want me to ever tell anyone. Some things they're not going to make it into the pleadings, things that aren't going to make it in front of the judge, but things that they just want me to know because they've never told anyone. And they know we have that privilege. They know I can't tell anyone. And so sometimes I really have to remind myself it is an honor to be that person for someone. It's an honor to be the person that someone trusts with their deepest and their darkest. And so for me, I think that I have to remind myself that in a lot of ways, I am kind of sitting in the place of Jesus in those moments where I know when I'm not doing well and I'm praying, I'm like, he is hearing my deepest and my darkest, and it's going to kind of stop with him. And so I have to remind myself, I can't be their Jesus, but I can be hopefully a light to them where I am a trusted individual. I am someone they can tell everything to. And if I think it would be helpful for their case, I might ask, is that something that you'd be okay with being in there? Because that's a really good point or something like that. But I think for me, reminding them, we do have these elements that we have to meet. The judge is going to be listening for these key terms, material change in circumstance, or hearing that, you're not asking for spousal support when you could be receiving this much under the guidelines. That holds power. Let's talk about maybe what else we can ask for instead, So on one side, keeping the law in their mind, because that is something we have to prove, and those are elements we have to meet. But at the same time, on the other side, being able to be like, girl, he did what? Let's talk about that some more. Tell me all about that. And so I think finding that middle ground is something at first I did have some difficulty with because I just wanted it to be a vent session. I wanted to just hear about what was going on. But then remembering, okay, we have elements we have to meet. If I think that something you're saying could meet one, I'll elaborate. But at the same, that's kind of, keeping them level-headed, reminding them that the judge isn't in your living room. The judge doesn't hear these conversations. Let's figure out how we can present this. But at the same time, remembering it's an honor to be someone that you trust. So go ahead and just lay it on me if you need to. We can get into the more serious stuff later. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think that faith brings you back down to earth, and it sounds like that's what uniquely separates you from other attorneys. And I think
I would hope so for sure. I have to remind myself of that too.
Yeah, it's unique. From the lawyers I've spoken with on the business side, I know a lot of them, when they're getting out of college, they have this passion about them that they bring into the world. And then at some point in time, I don't know if it's a case they reach or some point in time where friction hits them, they lose the faith in the system. They're like, the system's broken. I'm trying to fight the system. Then they become a part of the system. And I see this continual cycle, and I'm on the outside. So I'm viewing it from a bird's eye view.
Right.
Is that something you see from your perspective, that is what other attorneys are going through? And then, how to keep yourself potentially out of that loop.
Definitely. I think for me, nothing is more important than remembering whose I am, remembering that I am a Christian. Even as much as I love my job, I will never say that that's more important to me than being a Christian. And so for one, if an attorney gets an email from me and it's really nasty and it's really not something that displays the fruits of the Spirit, then who am I actually reflecting? Like Galatians 1:10 talks about, am I trying to impress man or am I trying to impress God? Because you can't really do both. And so for me, I do want to be a fierce advocate. I want the other attorney to sometimes underestimate me and then have me kind of show them up in court. I like that I'm able to do both. I do think that that's something that the Lord's blessed me with, is being able to be gentle in demeanor, but also be a really fierce advocate. And I think that it's hard to find the balance, but at the same time, I'm grateful that I feel like I know where to push and where not to. And I think that it's sometimes difficult to work with other attorneys who just don't have basic human respect and decency. Yeah. I think a lot of times for me, I know what pushes me to be kind. And I know that not every attorney I'll work with is going to know the Lord, and that's not what's going to push them. And again, my goal is to be a light for them too, my clients and them and the opposing party. And my job is to reflect Jesus in everything I do. And so for me, I think that obviously I have elements to meet. I have a case I need to prove. But at the end of the day, if an attorney walks away and they're like, wow, you were a really good attorney, but somehow you were still kind. Like, I don't understand how you find that balance. If that sparks a conversation for why I am that way, because I have the Holy Spirit in me, I am going to welcome that conversation every day of the week. And so I definitely think that there's a way that passion and that righteous anger and that justice can coexist with respect and kindness and gentleness. I think it's a hard balance, and my flesh takes over a lot of the time. I get really frustrated. I have had emails hit my inbox that I feel like I have steam coming out of my ears. I'm so mad about them. But at the same time, remembering what I'm reflecting and that is just more important to me, then I think that is ultimately what helps make me a good attorney. And again, I think that there's definitely a line. I'm definitely not bringing up Jesus in every conversation, but at the same time, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about the Holy Spirit being a fragrance. And sometimes when someone walks by you and they have a perfume that smells really good or their shampoo smells really good, you might not be able to know exactly what that is. You don't necessarily know that that's, I don't know, whatever kind of shampoo they have or whatever perfume it is, but you can still get a sense of it. And so if my faith is just touching someone in a way where I don't have to tell them that it's Jesus, but they're like, something is different about that person, then that's ultimately the goal. So I think that finding that balance of that righteous anger and that justice and that fierce advocacy, while also showing respect and kindness, that is what I hope I reflect. But when other attorneys don't reflect it and they just have only the anger and only the frustration that comes with representing someone that is angry and frustrated, I have to give them grace, but also push back when I need to, because I don't want to be steamrolled just because I'm kind, and finding that balance.
Yeah. You don't want to be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
One of the questions that came in specific to this session, we know the divorce rate is going up.
Right.
It's like 70% or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own divorce story.
Right.
But to hear it from your perspective, like, what are the most common reasons that more and more people are getting divorced over time? Is it social media? Is it like the masculinity thing? Is it people now feel like they have more freedom and they don't need the state to do certain things? Like, what do you see from your perspective as the reason first people get divorced? Then we can kind of dive into the custody piece of it.
That's a great question. So in Virginia, there's two kinds of divorce. There's fault-based and then no fault-based. And fault-based is your adultery, your cruelty, your abuse. And for those, that's of course something you're going to put in a complaint. You're probably not going to want to kind of settle with that person. You're going to feel wronged by that. The other side is no fault. And that's much, much more common that I've seen. That's where you lack good communication. You're not able to prioritize each other. And so if I were to kind of pinpoint maybe a reason, it has to be in line with social media. It has to be. It's so easy to turn away from your partner and turn toward your phone, turn toward Instagram, turn toward any other distraction. And I think that people aren't as comfortable welcoming the hard conversations that might save their marriage, that might actually affect the next 30, 40, 50 years of their life. And I think that a lot of times too, when you have different parenting styles and you don't want to talk about a middle ground, that I think has a lot to do with it as well. I don't yet have human children. I do have a golden retriever.
Nice. Yeah.
So I do have a child, but you understand. But at the same time, even conversations about disciplining her, like table food that we shouldn't be giving her. I know real children, it's a much higher scale, but already you're going to clash on anything with your partner. You're going to clash on anything. And it's either one of you gives and you bend and you give into what they feel is important to them, which is sometimes the right answer, or you push on what you have your convictions about. And sometimes that's the right answer. But sometimes neither of you are correct and you have to find a middle ground. And I think that more and more when I ask for the reason behind the divorce, because I might have to put it in the complaint, the reason is just, it's just, I don't know, it's just not there anymore. But it really boils down to you're just not clicking anymore. And it's probably because you haven't had conversations about things that you need to be talking about. And in lieu of those conversations, you're scrolling, you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram. And I am just as victim to it. If I don't want to talk about something, I'm like, I need to go wash my hands. Like, no, you don't need to wash your hands right now.
Uncomfortable.
When you're uncomfortable, it's so easy to turn to one of the 10 million things that you have on your phone instead of just sitting and talking.
Yeah. How important is to that dynamic is mental health? Because I feel like mental health is also on the rise, divorce on the rise, trying to look at correlations between these two. If somebody is not having the conversation, is that creating the demise of mental health, or is it the upfront mental health struggle is making people avoid those types of conversations?
I think that's such a great question. Very much so chicken or the egg kind of question.
Yeah.
I think for some, home can be a really safe place when you're out and you're anxious or you're feeling a bout of depression or you're feeling, again, your mental health just running wild. Some people want to go home because they feel calm there. They can jump in the shower and just ignore their thoughts for 20 minutes. They can go to watercolors that they have at home and they can just paint and have fun and just enjoy their silence. But for some, home is more stressful than leaving home. A lot of times, if they have made a home with a partner and that partner, every conversation they have is tumultuous, it is screaming, yelling, then home isn't a safe place. And so if you're already anxious and you want to find a safe place and home isn't that, then where do you go? That is also going to spike mental health issues. And so I know for me, I also struggle with anxiety. I'm on, I'll tell anybody I'm on 2 or 3 anxiety medications. It's just my serotonin levels don't do what they're supposed to do, I guess. But for me, sometimes talking to my husband helps, but sometimes I do want to be alone because I don't want to talk about it. It makes me more anxious to talk about it. So if your marriage and the person who used to be your safe place, the only person that you could share those thoughts with is no longer that, I think that absolutely will lead to divorce because it's like, well, if you were the one that was making me feel better and now you're adding to it, why are we still doing this? So I think that, again, chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
I guess if I had to choose, I think that mental health is affected by so many outside factors, and it causes you to look deeper into your life. And if your marriage is no longer bringing light, then I think that unfortunately that's going to be on the list of things that you want to part with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the emotion versus the logic.
Yes.
The fight in our brain. I think the divorce and the child custody scenario really brings to light, like, are you emotional or are you more logical? Like that whole equation.
Definitely.
And I'm sure you have to bring people down to the more of the logic and the code and things of that nature, but all they're thinking is emotional. So how do you kind of cut through that without being by the book and making sure you're bringing your faith, but also looking at them as a human being and knowing that it's probably the most difficult period of their life, that they're going through something that they're looking for you to potentially solve for them.
Absolutely. I think that they do go hand in hand, but I will say that when someone comes in and they are just seeing red, they're so upset about whether it be divorce or custody. If they're coming in and the enemy is their partner in that moment, for one, I'm going to just let them get it out. Let them first just vent. And I'll be kind of listening in for things that they say. For example, one of the factors is, one parent's willingness to support the relationship with the other parent. So if they're saying something like, he never lets me see my child, or she never lets me take him to basketball practice, even when it's my time, or something like that, or they're not encouraging the weekly family dinners that we've been having, or something like that, then I'll kind of make note of that. But at the same time, if I've noticed that we've been talking for 30, 45 minutes and not one single box has been checked for what a judge would want to hear to ultimately make that ultimate custody decision, then at that point, that's when sometimes I have to just go down the list of the factors and be like, okay, well, how do you feel that he encourages your child's relationship with you? Or how do you feel that he is doing mentally himself? Is he able to prioritize his own relationship with his child, or something like that? But at the same time, I think that emotions aren't necessarily the enemy in family law, because a judge wants to see that you're willing to co-parent. I would say maybe 80%, if I had to put a number on it, 80%, if I had to put a number on it, of clients that I get, their children are typically under the age of 10, which means they have minimum 8 to 12 years left that they have to parent with this other person. They have to. So my job, I think, too, is helping them see that reality, seeing even if you have a custody schedule of each of you have the child for 1 week, if you exchange Sundays at 6, you don't want every single Sunday at 6 for the next 12 years to be something that you dread. And so I think that remembering that this person isn't the enemy, they are your child's parent, the same way that you are your child's parent, and just helping them maybe try to reframe that person's placement, not just in their child's life, but in their life. I think that sometimes can help, because again, they are a co-parent. They're not just your ex. They're your child's parent, and you have to prioritize that relationship too.
Hey everyone, this episode is sponsored by my company, Valor Cybersecurity, where we help defense contractors navigate the uncharted waters of cybersecurity compliance. As a cyber attack victim myself, I know the impact that this plays in people's lives, and at Valor, we solve that each and every day. If you're a defense contractor feeling frustrated and confused when it comes to cybersecurity compliance, visit valor-cybersecurity.com, take our free assessment, and get started on your journey to clarity in cybersecurity.
So I think, one, letting the emotion be what it is. If it is anger, if it is sadness, then letting it exist, but then helping them turn that into, okay, let's talk about how we're moving forward now. That is what has been happening. But if you don't want that to be your reality for the next 12 years, let's talk about how to reframe it and maybe use it for something that can be ultimately beneficial for your child, because you're both raising this child, you're both affecting them. And if your child starts to realize that mom and dad hate each other, that is not what you want. So I think prioritizing that is really, really important.
Yeah, the perspective on things of what is most important, even though you feel that person is enemy number one.
Right.
I think is probably something you have to navigate day in and day out.
Right.
What have you found are some strategies to help in that reframing process? Because it obviously takes time. They don't just come see you and then all of a sudden they see their partner differently.
Which I would love, but no, I don't have that power. But
not yet, at least, not yet.
Right.
But what are some strategies you've seen people who have really maybe come in seeing red and all of a sudden, they know their partner has wronged them, but they start to see things from more of a, how does my kid see this?
Right.
And anything you've seen that has been like a huge success story and where somebody's been able to flip it, or they're like, because you said this one thing, it really changed the way I saw the whole situation.
Right. I think that for one, their own mindset of this person is they had likely a relationship with this person. Then they might have gotten married and then they had kids. And so for a while, they saw this person in one light. This is my partner. This is my boyfriend, girlfriend. This is my husband, wife. But then once they have children, a lot of times they forget that that is the person that they first maybe fell in love with. And I think a lot of times, again, this is kind of getting into, I'm not their therapist and I can't necessarily save their marriage. If they've come to me, they've decided, they're like, this isn't working out. But at the same time, at one point, that was their favorite person. At one point, they said, you are the person that I want to spend my life with. And so again, it isn't necessarily something that I can make them see the best parts of this person again, but I can at least try and help them remind themselves of the fact that this person hasn't always been the enemy. This wasn't an accident that you met this person. You chose to have this person in your life. And again, that's not every situation. That's not every stance. Sometimes children result from, accidents completely. But at the same time, if I have a client who is a divorce and custody client, they're going through a divorce, they were married for 5 years before they had kids. If they want a positive co-parenting relationship, one, reframing their perspective of this person in a way where I can ask them, so why did you guys first fall in love? What happened? How did you guys kind of get to where you are now? And they start to say, well, he was so kind. He was so funny. I'm like, well, let's talk about that. Do you think that he makes your son laugh? Does he still make your son laugh? Yeah, he does. Okay, cool. And just kind of asking those questions to maybe try and reframe, because again, they're going to be working with this person co-parenting for years and years to come. Even after the child turns 18, they're probably both going to be at their wedding. They're both going to be at their college graduation. And so just remembering that this is probably a person that will be in your life for life. You don't want to dread every time they're going to be at a family reunion or at a graduation party. So that's one way. But the second way is it's okay to only see this person as your child's other parent. Sometimes clients will come in and over the course of representation, they'll stop referring to them by their name, but just kind of referring to them as dad or as mom, and sometimes when I'm in court, I'll do the same thing. If I'm talking to the judge, I'll be like, from dad's perspective, the child is X, Y, and Z, but from mom's perspective, X, Y, and Z as well. And so I think that a lot of times, if you kind of reframe your mindset, if the first option isn't working, of remembering the positive qualities of this person, sometimes just remembering that this is just your co-parent. This is just your child's parent. That can sometimes be a really healthy mindset switch as well, because then you're not worried about your relationship with them. You're worried about your child's relationship with them, which at the end of the day is what is the most important, especially if you've already decided that it's not going to work out between you two. Maybe stop trying to make it work out in a way that it used to. Now it's going to work out because you're co-parenting together. So focus on your child's relationship with them. And that can sometimes be a really, really healthy thing.
Yeah. That's interesting on the reframe of roles and labels.
Right.
And because I think words are extremely important in how we talk to ourselves and how we talk to others, whether in court
Definitely.
or having a conversation with a co-parent. And when I looked across all the different videos on divorce and on child custody, the word that kept coming up was like the system's broken, or everybody was blaming it on the system.
Right.
And I see that a lot in the industry that I run a business in, is everybody tries to find a finger to point.
Right.
Where do you feel like that finger gets pointed most? Is it at the attorney, or is it at the court system? Is it at the other partner? Where does that typically get pointed most?
I would first and foremost, it's almost always going to be pointed at the other partner first. Mm-hmm. So at least in Virginia, the life cycle of a case is they come and meet with me, at least for custody. Well, I guess we'll start there with custody. Is they come to me, we talk about everything, we'll file petitions for custody. If there isn't already an agreement in place, you're going to be filing those initial petitions, talking about child support, visitation, primary versus what is joint custody, that kind of thing. You're going to receive a court date, and that's just a first initial hearing. That's where the judge is going to hear, okay, why are we here? Is there any possible way we could come to an agreement? If not, then we're going to set an actual trial date. And someone named a guardian ad litem is appointed, and they're basically going to be the child's attorney. So they're employed by the state, and they are basically advancing the best interest of the child. So a lot of times, if the guardian, who's a completely neutral third party, meets with mom and dad separately, and mom is going to be blaming dad, dad's going to be blaming mom, the guardian's going to say, but how does that affect little Susie or little Johnny? How does that affect them? And so her mindset or his mindset is always going to be on the child, which makes sometimes the parent is going to blame the guardian because they're a neutral third party. But then if I say something that, again, might be very founded in the code, it might be 100% supported by the Code of Virginia, but it's not something that my client wanted to hear, then I'll kind of become the enemy. And I tell my clients up and down, I say, I do expect you to respect me and I respect you. But at the same time, if I'm your punching bag because I'm the only person who will sit and listen to you, I'm okay with that. I know you're leading with emotion, So sometimes when I'm the enemy, I'll kind of welcome that more, because if we're in court and an opposing party says something that my client doesn't agree with, and they're just like the judge doesn't want to see that. And so if I say something though, and it's founded in the code, I've already talked about it with them, I've already said, this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to bring up, then that might be welcomed more by my client instead of the opposing counsel or the opposing party saying it. So I would say that 95% of the time it starts off with the partner being the enemy, then one of the attorneys, and then at the end of the day, of course, it becomes the judge if it's a arrangement that they don't like. So I do think that the system broadly is the enemy a lot of the time, but that's because of the life cycle of the case and who is making what decisions at what point. Because the guardian ultimately makes a recommendation based on their observation of everything. So I think that it starts off with the partner because they're the one that they've been doing life with, but then I'm doing life with them because I'm hearing everything. Then the guardian is doing life with them because they do a home visit and they see various things. But then ultimately, regardless of what arguments we make, the judge is going to make whatever decision they make, and then they become the enemy. So I think it matters at what part of the case we're talking about, but usually it's the partner because they wouldn't be there if it weren't for them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How many, out of 10 cases, how many are high conflict? Because I think that's the only ones that we typically hear about. Right. I'm sure there's some that just is easy and the couple is just like, all right, it didn't work and here's the agreement and we're good to go.
Right.
Whether kids are involved or not. How many are considered high conflict versus the ones that aren't?
I would say that a lot of times people do want to settle, but most of them are going to be adversarial. Most are going to be pretty high conflict because if they could settle, they probably wouldn't be coming to me. But a lot of times people don't know that they can settle without an attorney. A lot of times people think that you have to have an attorney. And me being one, I welcome anyone coming in and talking with me about what the elements are, what the Code of Virginia is. Because if you do ultimately go to court, you'll need to know those things because the judge needs to hear those things. But at the same time, if you come to an agreement and you write that agreement up and you say, I'm receiving the child this number of days, you get this Christmas, I get next Christmas. If you can come to an agreement on those things, then you can just draft an agreement and drop it off at the courthouse, ultimately give it to a judge and the clerk can kind of talk you through what you might need to file with that, of course. But at the same time, if you are able to settle with your partner, you're going to feel like it was just more in your hands instead of coming to an attorney, having the other party get an attorney, have the attorneys battle it out, and then have a judge ultimately make a decision. It's easy to feel that you were not doing everything that you could do to give your child maybe the best possible outcome. Again, that's not the case at all, but you might feel that way because the judge made the decision instead of you and your partner sitting down and making the decision together and coming to an agreement, settling, and dropping it off at the courthouse. So I think that I would say by the time they come to me, they're probably more adversarial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that it escalates like that. And I think one of the things I heard is, as these cases evolve, we go from I just don't agree with that person to this person's the worst ever.
Yes.
And those are two very different perspectives. We don't see the world the same versus this person is just terrible and horrible. And that's what I consider more high conflict where you just hate the person so much that
Right.
you can't, anything they say, you're going to challenge it
Right.
as the other party.
That's true. I would say when you put it that way, with the parents just despising each other, thankfully, that's actually not as common. When you say conflict, I think I was thinking that they just can't come to an agreement on something.
Yeah.
But in terms of the parties just hating each other, I would say that that is more rare.
Yeah.
Parties usually want to see the best in the other person because they know they'll be dealing with them for a while. But in terms of them being the enemy, I would say that that is maybe 20% out of 100%. Because again, maybe internally they feel that way, but in terms of I want that person to receive nothing from my estate. I want them to waive their share of my retirement. I don't want to pay them spousal support because they're the worst. In most cases, that's not the way that it is. But there are a few. And for those clients, being able to just be a sounding board for them is something that I typically welcome more so because, again, they are leading with rage and I want them to be able to get it out to somebody instead of getting it out to that person because I don't want the police to be called. I don't want there to be protective orders in place unless they're necessary, obviously. But I don't want my client just seeing red and then doing something that they later regret to be the case. So I want them to talk to me about it, have me be able to say, let's do this, instead of just taking it out, because that is also easy when you genuinely cannot stand somebody, which sometimes happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. What are the top 3 things you would say somebody going through a child custody case is navigating? Obviously, money's at the top of that list potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I would say number 1, the standard in Virginia across the board is the best interest of the child. And so when judges see that they're prioritizing maybe their own comfort or their relationship with the other party over the child, that is when it gets a big thumbs down. So I would say, again, focusing on the best interest of the child, if they are not going to a safe home or if they're not feeling supported by a parent in some way, then that is something that the judge is going to look really, really heavily on. And so the second that it becomes a he versus she type situation, instead of let's focus on the child, that is going to be the number 1 thing. Of course, money as well. It is, child support's a real thing. There are guidelines that if you're just curious, if you're going through something like this and you're like, what would my child support be? You can you can just Google Virginia Child Support Calculator and you can put in your monthly income, the other party's monthly income, if there is childcare, if there's anything like that, and it will kind of spit out a general number and you can kind of maybe see what that is. So money is absolutely a thing. And then lastly, I would say the third is probably just your relationship with the other person, which I know we've been talking a lot about that, but you are going to be working with this person for the rest of your child's life. So making sure you're prioritizing your peace, whatever that looks like with that person, I always recommend that.
Yeah. That goes back to that mental health piece. I think that's
definitely
extremely important.
I definitely recommend that anyone going through any kind of family law case, I absolutely recommend looking into therapy, not because you're weak, but because if anything, it will just help you remain level-headed going through something that you never thought you'd be going through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other biggest lessons for, somebody that is either a service member or they're in transition out of jobs, they're going through a life transition and at the same time, maybe they're going through some type of divorce or child custody and trying to figure it all out. Any biggest lessons or advice that you'd give to that person?
I would definitely say allow yourself the comfort of taking a step back and viewing what's going on with a level head and kind of a bird's eye view, because everyone who is representing you, a judge, someone who is maybe drafting a document that will directly affect you, is going to be looking from a completely third-party perspective. And it's really, really easy in any situation in life, whether it be entering a new job or joining a new church or, entering into a new relationship or ending a friendship. It's so easy to be led by our perspective. And our perspective is really, really, really important. It's also really, really, really skewed. So I think that my biggest piece of advice is know what you're bringing to the table in terms of your emotion. Again, emotions are not the enemy, but they are really strong. And so just remembering that you bring a level of concern or fear or frustration to the actual picture that a neutral third party just wouldn't be bringing. And so let yourself feel it. But when you're looking at your situation, let yourself also try and ignore the emotion just for a minute to see what's actually going on. So that's number one. And then also just knowing what the actual system is going to be like, know what it's going to look like. If you think that you're going to go into an adversarial divorce, for example, thinking it'll cost $100, go sign an agreement, it'll take a week, you will be unfortunately very, very sadly mistaken. I know at our firm, at least, we will be completely transparent with maybe how much it might cost, how long it might take. And so I think the biggest thing is knowing your emotion going into it, but also having really realistic expectations, because those expectations might not be what you thought they would be. But again, talking to an attorney, seeing exactly what the system is going to look like, what it might be like, talk about both ends of the spectrum with your attorney. I recommend that as well.
Yeah. Does it always like take more and cost more? I think the expectation that people see when they start research is like it's two ends of the spectrum. It's either it's gonna be $100,000 and it's gonna take 10 years,
right?
Or it's like it'll take a year and it'll be $5,000. So it's
right.
all, I think people come into it with different perspectives, but I'm
right.
sure that's a big question you're asked is what should I expect?
Yeah,
and it's going to be different in every case. So
right.
it's hard to be specific on what they should expect.
Yes. And it will be different in every case. I think a lot of times you've heard the term, the billable hour or attorney's fees and that kind of thing. Most of the time in litigation, you're really just paying for the attorney's time. Mm-hmm. And so going into a consultation with an attorney saying, how long do you think this will take? And what is your hourly rate? Yeah. That is going to be maybe an uncomfortable conversation, but it also will help paint a really strong picture of what it might look like. If you know that your spouse is not going to respond to any email that you send, but you want your attorney to keep reaching out, that's going to be a lot of time and money. If you know they're not going to respond to something from the very beginning, let's just file a motion at the beginning. Let's just file for, file a complaint at the beginning. Because if you're trying to settle and you're paying your attorney for their time and you don't know how long it's going to take, that's just an infinite number that no attorney will be able to give you. But if you know, okay, every hour they spend on my case will be this number, then you can maybe have a better idea of what you might be getting into.
Yeah.
But I've heard this quote and I completely agree with it. Your divorce will take as long as your spouse wants it to. Because if they keep waiting on dropping the ball, if they're not responding to something, then it will prolong it, as opposed to if they have an attorney and their attorney is also bound by the rules of, the ethics rules of being an attorney in Virginia, and they have to keep communication, that will make it maybe a little bit cheaper. Yeah. So it's hard to guess. We try as hard as we can to keep it as cheap and as quick as possible, but there's just no way of knowing.
Yeah, it's an extremely complex world. And
it is.
It takes a specific brain to be in that world. So extremely appreciative of what you bring to the world around you and the people that come in to confide in you. I know this conversation is going to help a lot of people, so I'm really excited to put it out in the world. One of the ways we like to kind of wrap up the show, because we're all about connection, whether it's connection to yourself or connection to the outside world. And
right.
You're obviously at the center of that when people are the most unclear on what connection may mean to them, because that may be a future relationship.
Right.
So I'm curious, what does the word connection mean to you?
I love that question. The word connection to me means someone being their most raw, authentic self, and then someone else's raw, authentic self meeting in the middle. I think that sometimes you bring a professional connection to the table, and that connection is a business card. It is sharing a conversation over coffee about what you do for work. But connection in that sense is something different than a friend coming over when they've just lost a loved one and they are just weeping in your arms and connecting over your rawest self there. And so I think that connection in general is just two people, two minds meeting in the middle in different ways, but that middle ground being a place that you feel, I almost said connected, but that's the word we're talking about, that you overlap in a way that you feel sometimes benefited by the other person, but sometimes you just feel excited to move forward with that new relationship with that person. If that relationship is a professional one or if it's a personal one, and general connection is just two people bringing everything that they bring to the table and meeting in the middle. And sometimes that means a new relationship, a new professional relationship, a new friendship, something of that nature, but just overlapping with what you bring to the table, which can be an endless amount of things. But yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sloan.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you're feeling more connected from this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with someone that you care about. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Connected Mindset Podcast.